Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, I'll be guiding you through how to install Microsoft Visual Studio. We are going to visit the link displayed on the screen to download Visual Studio. This is the Visual Studio homepage. So under the download option, we've got 3 different editions that we can download. I'm going to be downloading the community edition, which is completely free. So I'm going to click, and what that will do, it will download the Visual Studio community version installer. So you can see here it says vs_community. So this is the installer that we will run to download and install Visual Studio. If you are new to using Visual Studio, you might want to take a look at these tips and resources to get started. So here basically you have different options here depending on the project you're trying to develop or create. If you want to receive tips about a specific type of project, you could click on the radio button that relates to your particular project. You need to submit your email address, and then you get information relating to tips. If you want to do so, you can click on that. If not, you can just completely exit this form by clicking on the X, and that will exit. So you can see here my Visual Studio community installer has been downloaded. So I'm just going to double click to run the installer. So I double click. You should see this box that says Visual Studio installer. Before you get started, we need to set up a few things. So just click continue. And what's happening now is that Visual Studio will start downloading the initial files. The download speed will vary depending on your internet connection. By default, Visual Studio will install the Visual Studio core editor, which is this editor here. And then here you can add individual components of the workload that you want to use. So at the moment, it tells you the total space required is just 616 megabyte. That is if I'm only installing the Visual Studio core editor. However, if I'm going to add workloads, the total space required will also increase. So you can add workload based on the type of project you want to create. So here I'm interested in web development. So I'm going to click on this checkbox here to download the workload that relates to the project I am trying to work on. As you add a workload, you can tell you here I've added this workload, and the total space required for the installation has also increased to 7.06 gigabyte based on the workload I've added. So the more workload you add, the more required space you need for installation. Note that you can also select optional components of a workload. You can notice that this workload I've added, ASP.NET and web development, I've got all these components also added. So I can also optionally remove the ones I do not need for the installation. I also want to be able to do some desktop development in Windows. So I'm going to choose another workload. I'm going to choose this workload, which is .NET desktop development. I'm going to click on that, and that will add that workload to my installation. There are other workloads depending on the project you want to create. You can always run the installer again once you have installed Visual Studio, and always come back to this workload area and add whatever workload or the components you want from a particular workload. So you can see now I've added 2 workloads. I've added ASP.NET, and I've also added the .NET desktop development. So you can see now it's still telling me the total space required is this. So I need to have this space to accommodate all the components I've added to be installed with Visual Studio. So I'm happy with the workloads I've added at the moment. So I'm going to click on this install button to begin the installation. You may get a pop-up box that's saying thank you for installing Visual Studio, and saying why Visual Studio is installing. We'd like to ask you a few questions, so you can take the survey or just click not now. The time it takes to install the Visual Studio Community Edition will depend on your internet speed and the resources on your computer. If you have other versions of Visual Studio installed, it will also show up inside the Visual Studio installer. As you can see here, it's also displaying Visual Studio Community 2017 because I also have that installed. So if I want to make modifications to that, all I need to do is run the installer, and then there is an update button here that I can activate to update the Community 2017 edition. For now, I am focusing on the Visual Studio Community 2019. You can see the installation is progressing. There is a checkbox here that says start after installation. If you don't want that to happen, you can just uncheck that box. Once the installation of Visual Studio is complete, you will get a message to reboot or restart your computer. So once you get that message, just restart your computer. It is important that you do restart your computer when you get the prompt to do so. You need to do that before you can actually start Visual Studio.